If you've attempted to quit many times and you found it a struggle and you've relapsed, chances are you've been trying to solve the wrong problem, actually. Most people think that addiction is all about the substance and all about the behavior. And certainly the conventional approaches really focus on that very narrow view. But this is really not the case. Addiction is an inner state. It's a state of suffering, of disconnection with a life out of alignment with who you really are. And no amount of willpower or medication or superficial mind distractions are going to fix that. Consciousness-based recovery is really about transforming the inner world that creates the craving in the first place, so you no longer have anything to fight. So in this video, I'm going to break down the three foundations of consciousness-based recovery and the true inner transformation that's really the possibility here, that's really the silver lining of addiction recovery, and why this approach works where everything else has failed. So first of all, we're going to talk about addiction as an inner state. Then we're going to talk about how this inner state requires an inner transformation, not an external solution. And thirdly, we're going to talk about the key to inner transformation and how awareness plays a very crucial role in this process. So firstly, let's start with addiction as an inner state. If you think about addiction, it isn't about the substance, that's something that you're putting into yourself or the behavior that you're doing. If you're focusing on the addiction as purely the substance or the behavior, well, then you're going to be trying to stop taking that substance or stopping that behavior. And usually stopping the substance is most often a willpower attempt. Willpower doesn't actually look at the deeper reasons and the deeper issue, the root of why your system is wanting this substance or behavior in the first place. So if we just take a deeper look, we can see that the reason why that our system is craving the addictive substance or the behavior is because there's an inner suffering, and we want relief from that inner suffering. Now, this suffering can come in two forms. It can be a suffering of pain, or it can be the suffering of absence of pleasure. So a lot of emotional suffering in our life, a lot of inner discontent is something that in our society we're really not trained to handle very well. And in fact, our modern culture really hijacks our mind by trying to get us to change our inner state of being by using external resources, external tools, like external experiences. For example, the idea that if you're feeling bored, you should then engage in some entertainment, watch some video or go and have an experience. Or if there's a feeling of inner lack or inner lack of worth, let's say, then, going shopping and buying some more clothes or getting some more accessories, a better watch. Or if there's a lack of connection, then going and having a drink with people or something like that. So it's always this external focus that we're taking action on. And we've been kind of, in a sense, pulled in this direction because this is the way that most of our culture behaves. It's most of the products that are being produced are all about changing our external environment. And this came about through the success of science being able to manipulate the external world and producing technology that was able to create things like washing machines and cars and air conditioning and all sorts of other appliances that did make our life more convenient. And so we've kind of almost started to believe that if we want to change how we feel, if we want to become happier, we need to change our external world. That this is, at the heart of this is a very materialistic view of reality. In other words, the idea that what reality is a bunch of separate objects that we can manipulate and change, and then that has a change on us, and that even we are a separate object, and our brain is producing this suffering because of our brain chemistry, because of our hard wiring in the neurons, the cells in our brain are configured in a certain way. So this is like treating our brain and our body as a machine and applying the same principles to changing the external world as trying to change our internal world. But the problem is that doesn't actually really work for the pursuit of happiness, because happiness is a state of being. And yes, sure, it does get reflected in our body chemistry, our brain chemistry, but our experience is much more complex than all of that. Our experience is made up of not just the way that our brain functions, it's also our emotional feelings. We could say that that's all chemistry too, but this really comes into the conflict between the consciousness-based reality idea versus the materialist-based view of reality. Now, for quite a while, our culture has switched over to the materialist view, saying that it's all of, if it's we can't see it, it doesn't exist. And if we can't measure it, if we can't manipulate it, then we can't solve our happiness. Whereas the quantum physics has come along, which has looked into matter at the smallest level and found that actually at the basis of that, many physicists now would be saying that consciousness is a key part of our base reality. So this then connects with ancient wisdom, because a lot of ancient wisdom has a deep understanding of consciousness and how this affects our state of being. Medicine and therefore addiction recovery systems have actually reflect this bias towards the materialistic paradigm by focusing on substances as the problem, or behaviors as the problem, or brain chemistry purely as the problem. On the other hand, the consciousness-based viewpoint would say that how we experience things impacts on the reality of the base nature of reality. So, and that's coming from a quantum viewpoint where the consciousness of the observer has an impact on the behavior of the particles or the waves that are being measured. So two very different views. And what I'm trying to say is that this one is an external view, the materialist paradigm, and that's what most of the very narrow focus on behavior and substance has been caught up in. And then you've got this consciousness-based view, which is a more integrated and holistic, interconnected view of reality that has a much deeper possibilities in terms of dealing with addiction. If we consider that addiction is an internal state, I mean, cravings are an experience that we have when we have an internal state of either discomfort or a desire to get more pleasure. Both of those are internal states. And you'll notice that cravings come on stronger when we have extremes in either pain, and including emotional pain and suffering, or the need for some kind of enlivened experience, some excitement. And that's the pursuit of pleasure. So if we look deeper into addiction as an internal state, we find that if you have these moments of contentment, you have less need for your addiction, you have less cravings. In fact, I had one client a few months ago who, strong alcoholic, but went to this place where she was saying that she was just so content. She was just a wonderful experience that she was having. And to her surprise, she hardly had any cravings for alcohol. Now, that was just a spontaneous and not lasting situation, but it proves that her state of being, having this contentment, also led to her having far less cravings. And this is actually at the heart of a consciousness-based recovery. We're saying that your state of being, your state of consciousness, has an impact on your addiction. So let's look at how we can make a change. Like, what would we do in terms of our inner state? How would we look at that if we're not going to look at it from the disease model, that you've got something broken in your brain and that your brain chemistry needs fixing, or that your psychology needs to be rewired, or that you need to just make better choices. That's the traditional disease model thinking that focuses on managing the symptoms. How would we look at changing addiction from a consciousness-based perspective? Well, what we would do, um, we would look at addiction as an inner state, and then we would look at what is the root of that inner state, and then we would look at transforming that root. So the inner state of addiction is one of disconnection from our whole system being okay. It's a lack of okayness. It's a state of inner confusion and inner conflict and inner real suffering and discontent. So if we can look at the root of that suffering, of the root of that disconnection, and we can find a way to transform that, then we would have a new way to approach addiction, a way that not only just deals with the symptoms of addiction, but also transforms our whole life, our whole quality of life, our whole perspective on our life, the purpose of our life really as well. So consciousness-based recovery reframes addiction as the opportunity really for an awakening of a deeper understanding of what we are and who we are as a state, a possible state of genuine integration where we don't have this inner conflict, we don't have this inner confusion. What would that look like? Well, this type of transformation would replace the attempt to control addiction with real deep understanding with knowledge. And the knowledge would be the knowledge of more of what we are. The knowledge would be what it is that we really, really want. Now, if we start to look at that, what we really, really want, that's something that I do very early on in the program where I teach this consciousness-based inner transformation. I ask my clients to go through an exercise that really uncovers what they really, really want. And inevitably, what occurs is this realization, what they're really looking for is not more external things and objects, it's not a better house, it's not better food, it's not better clothing. What it is this sense of deep peace. Or another way to put it would be this inner contentment, or another way to put it is often a feeling of love or a feeling of belonging or a feeling of connectedness. This is what most people are really, really wanting. And if you think about that for a moment, everything you do in your day, everything you're doing and aiming for in your week, in your year, when it really comes down to it, sure, there's a physical, let's say, milestone that you can see, there's a result, but the purpose of that result is genuinely, really an experience. And what is the result of that experience? It's some kind of inner state. And when you really trace the root back, it will come back to it, some kind of inner happiness, some kind of inner contentment, some inner peace. And often if it's related to other people, that involves connection, love, sense of belonging, acceptance. And if we go deeper, again, we can access a state of being where we don't feel separate. We feel part of the whole. And I'll talk in a minute about how we would go about that. But really, when we learn more of what we really want, we then realize that what we really want is an inner state, like I said. And then if we start to pursue that inner state, our whole system starts to integrate. It starts to focus on what's more important. It stops struggling against itself. And we start to find that we need less in order to have what we want. We become, in a sense, more still. And we find that just in our state of being, where we're more open, more still, that we actually are starting to sense more of what we really, really desire. And this is a process of inner transformation that occurs. It doesn't happen overnight because we're starting off in this state of turmoil and we're going towards this state of clarity, this state of peace, this state of simplicity that really opens up to the most, in a sense, deeply satisfying way of life. So transformation really, like I said, replaces control, and clarity replaces struggle. So the third point is the key to inner transformation. Now, the key to inner transformation is the place you start, and really where you start, the pathway and the end state, which is really endless, is awareness. So if we are going to look at addiction as an inner state and then that requires inner transformation, then that inner transformation has to start with a conscious mind. It has to start with what is available to the conscious mind. And what is available in every experience is awareness. There is no experience that occurs without awareness being present. Now, let's break that down for a moment. There's awareness in the sense of we're awake, having an experience. And then there's awareness that we're aware of that, you see? So, for example, let's say you're awake watching a movie, and of course there's awareness there so that you can watch and, take in the movie. That's one level of awareness. But you're kind of, in a sense, forgetting that you're sitting in the seat. You're often immersed in the movie and time just goes by. You're so engrossed in the movie kind of like sweeps you along. But you can say there is a level of awareness for that even to occur. But then there's the awareness that you are aware watching the movie. There's that kind of meta awareness or that higher level awareness, the awareness of awareness. So right there is a key shift in consciousness. If you can become more aware of what is occurring, of you being present, that is a shift in consciousness. It creates a gap where you're not out of control anymore, right? Because the subconscious is just, running an automatic pilot. But if you are aware of being aware, you can see things that are occurring without getting swept up in them. And so that gap is where you have the ability to make a change, a conscious change. You get free choice there. You get choice. And little changes, little adjustments in how you operate can turn into new ways of operating, new automatic pilot ways that the subconscious takes on as automatic. So what happens is awareness exposes the unconscious patterns that drive craving and all of these other turbulent experiences, these turbulent reactions that make us feel out of control. But like I said before, the root of all of that activity is to try and help us get away from pain and get pleasure. And the deepest pleasure is this deep inner peace and contentment. So awareness exposes these automatic pilot unconscious reactions. So when you see the real cause of your addiction, you end up stopping the fight because you're fighting the wrong battle. So in other words, instead of fighting the symptom or fighting the behavior, trying to fight your body with willpower to stop taking your addiction, if you get to the root of it and you start to resolve that inner state, that's when the subconscious actually lets go of the addiction. So let me explain that a little bit more, because what this really requires, it requires you to become aware of more of what's available to you, more of what you actually are. So awareness can be aware of what's happening, but it can also be aware of your presence, your actual state of being. And when you start to become aware of awareness, you start to get closer to seeing more of what you are. Let's just do a little exercise. So if you look around the room, you notice that everything here is not separate from your awareness, okay? So the wall over there, what's going on outside, you're aware of all of this. That means awareness is not separate from all of this. Now, don't get caught up in thinking of the materialistic paradigm where you're assuming everything's a separate object. I'm not saying it's not. From that point of view, that explains things. But from this point of view, from the awareness point of view, just see that awareness is not separate from anything. Otherwise, you wouldn't be aware of it. So therefore, there's oneness in awareness. You can already experience that oneness in awareness. Now, notice that you are not separate from awareness either. So that means you are one with awareness, and awareness is also one with everything. So everything is one in awareness. So that is more of an understanding of what you are compared to just this separate body that's having this separate experience in this room of separate objects. So awareness is a bit like space in the sense that space is everywhere. It's not separate from any object. In fact, objects are also space, different densities of space. Space isn't, in a sense, something that we notice. We often notice the objects, but it's a bit like awareness. We don't tend to notice awareness. We notice what we're aware of. But once you start to notice space or awareness, we notice that it's not separate from anything. The difference between space and awareness is space is not aware, as far as we know, but awareness is aware of itself. And that's very kind of hard to wrap your head around, because awareness is also not a thing. So when we say it's aware of itself, it's also not a thing, but it's still aware, it's still existent, and it's still not separate from us. So what this means is that we start to understand ourselves as different than just a separate object that's having an unpleasant experience. Now, where this really starts to change things is the more that you have this shift in consciousness, the more that you start observing what's happening rather than getting involved automatically. That observing what's going on is, in a sense, starts to create a level of stillness. So it's a bit like you've been throwing stones in a pond and it's always choppy. That's all you experience, the turbulence of all this automatic reactions, all these emotional, subconscious reactions that are trying to fix everything. It's just your subconscious is just reacting one reaction after another, like a chain of events. As soon as you have this shift, what ends up happening is that you stop throwing the stones in. You start just being still, and you're getting this opportunity to see what's happening, and things start to settle down. You start to experience this inner state change. You get a sense of peace occurs, and that's a deep pleasure. Your subconscious loves that. It wants more of that. So it also settles down, stops these inner reactions, because if you're feeling an inner peace, the kind of pleasure is what it's looking for. And that's not painful. So it starts to stop all of these reactions. And as these reactions settle down, this kind of space opens up, and we start to experience this ourselves as this state of peace and contentment, what we really, really want. And in that state, we don't have so much desire. We're already happy. We're already okay in that. So cravings lose their power. In fact, they stop being generated by the subconscious. So this is how a consciousness-based recovery approach leads to an inner transformation, which leads to the addiction becoming obsolete. And it also leads to greater awareness and greater self-knowledge. And really a lot of inner peace starts to open up. So you can see that by moving from um, the materialistic symptom-based approach of treating addiction to a consciousness-based approach of increasing awareness, this actually opens up a whole pathway of transformation. So addiction becomes the doorway of this transformation. And this transformation is leading deeper and deeper and more to an experience of what you really, really want, what the purpose of every day, the purpose of every motivation, every goal, every action is this state of being. And it's available to you right now. You have this already. You have access to it already. It's free. It's just a matter of a shift of perspective. Like I said, beginning of that is to become aware that you're aware. That change in your orientation of your consciousness is the key. And it's this subtle. To really get the full impact of that takes time. It takes months, takes years. But it's you also even maybe in this video you can experience a taste of that. And that taste, like it becomes stronger and more of your state of being, of your reality, of your understanding of your own nature develops, matures, and then it starts to have an impact on everything you do. So I hope this shows you a new way of approaching not only addiction, but your pursuit of what you really, really want. And of course, if you would like any help from me or my team, there's some links in the description. You can watch a masterclass. You can start for very, very little, and love to help you further. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video, or if that's you, I'll see you in the community. Okay, bye for now.